Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Welcome to the Economist's World Ocean Summit session on fishing. This is the third panel on this issue at the summit. These previous sessions on fishing considered achieving optimum fishers management and the state of harmful fishing subsidies. Of course, an issue that we thought had been, hoped to have been resolved at the end of last year, but of course, due to the challenges that many of us are under at the moment, that was not meant to be. So we're looking forward certainly to 2021 that this issue is resolved. Nevertheless, in this session, we will look at the fishing sector and retailers who are committing to responsible supply chains that take into account not just the environmental dimensions of sustainability, but the social ones as well. My name is Kristian Teleki. I am the director of the Friends Ocean Action at the World Economic Forum. I also have the pleasure of leading the Sustainable Ocean Initiative at the World Resource Institute and the head of the Secretariat for the High-Level Panel for a Sustainable Ocean Economy, and delighted to be your moderator today. We know that transitioning to sustainable fishing will boost a dwindling global catch, feeding millions, raising fishing seafood profits by 75 million a year, and leave more than 30% more fish in the sea. What's not to like about that? However, illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing, or IUU fishing, as it is known, is a practice which is happening around the world. It puts fish stocks, human rights, and marine ecosystems in peril. Largely out of sight, illegal fishers are stealing millions of tons of fish from the ocean each year and take billions of dollars out of national economies. They also pose a threat to responsible fishers and fishing nations who supply fish and seafood in markets across the world, and that billions rely on for their critical source of protein and nutrition on a daily basis. And on top of this, of course, is COVID-19 and the pandemic, which has caused widespread upheaval for the whole fishing and aquaculture industry around the world, and in some cases have made the threats and challenges to this sector even more acute. Clearly, challenges can be only addressed if players across the seafood sector act in concert and are the leaders and drivers of change and are at the helm. The good news is that there's considerable amount happening at the moment. Just last month, we saw a new coalition of 5 of the most influential industry and multi-stakeholder platforms in the global seafood industry launch, and who are committing to eradicate fish caught from illegal and unreported and unregulated sources from their supply chains. This new coalition represents over 150 companies, including many of the world's largest seafood producers and retailers. Together, this meta coalition is leveraging their collective influence to call for urgent action from governments and other industry players to combat the scourge of this in the ocean. That all said, without a doubt, we live in some very interesting and challenging times for the business of fishing and food from the sea, or blue food, as it is often referred to. But there is much optimism, I would argue, to look at these challenges and opportunities and be inspired by what business can do and is doing today. I am pleased to be joined by 4 fascinating panelists who collectively have an extraordinary sustainability pedigree, and as such, some very interesting experiences and perspectives to offer. So, Andrea Weber, Director of Corporate Responsibility at Metro; Gert le Roux, who is the Aquaculture and Fisheries Specialist at Woolworths South Africa; Craig Morris, Chief Executive Officer of the genuine Alaska Pollock Producers; and Marika McCauley Sine, who is the Vice President of Global Sustainability at Mars Petcare. You can learn more about these amazing people and their biographies, which should be below your screen in this media player during the presentation here today. So with that, let me turn to our first panelist on this and come to you, Andrea. Andrea, Director of Corporate Responsibility at Metro, Chair of the steering board of the Global Tuna Alliance, a member of the steering board of the Global Sustainable Seafood Initiative, an amazing long career in sustainability, and clearly sustainability runs in your veins. So amazing to have you with us. Metro, again, a long history, largely, I'm sure, down to you and colleagues, of sustainably sourcing seafood. And really, I would say pushing the boundaries and level of ambition, within the company, but with your peers as well. And I note that you've recently and very excitingly updated the fish and seafood policy with an integrated fish and seafood action plan. And I think this really kind of speaks to that level of ambition and constantly refreshing that ambition. And then I'd love if you could say a little bit more about that and give us some of that insights of what's driving that and about this this plan. So over to you.
Thank you, Kristian. And let me start with a few words on Metro, what you already highlighted. So for those who don't know Metro so well, Metro is an international wholesale business with a main focus on food, globally represented in 34 countries with 678 stores. Fish and seafood is one of the USP in our stores for our professional customers, and thus also for our business. We sell 200,000 tons of fish and seafood per year, roughly, and with that, we are the leading fish wholesaler in Europe. As said, our target is actually to secure a sustainable future which will deliver successful business for Metro, our customers, and our suppliers. So talking about the fish and seafood procurement policy and the plan, we of course have targets to reach out for certification and also social compliant and traceability. Our seafood action plan actually puts these policy into implementation with actions on sustainable fish and seafood. This action plan consists of 3 pillars. One, I mentioned already, is the certification part. Second is partnerships. And third are projects to actually ensure relevant actions with the right partners and to highlight the importance of collaboration within the whole supply chain. And Kristian, you mentioned before this meta collaboration, and giving you one example on tuna, for example. Tuna is a very important product for us, for our professional customers. Metro is one of the founders of the Global Tuna Alliance, an independent group of retailers and supply chain companies working to ensure that tuna ultimately meets the highest standards of environmental performance and social performance. So working in this pre-competitive way in industry, in multi-stakeholder platforms, with the respective market power the companies can bring in, we can actually much better address existing challenges in the fish supply chains than we could as a single company. This is why this action plan is so crucial for us.
Fantastic, Andrea. I love the notion of almost what you're saying is sort of strength in numbers and working together in a pre-competitive space. I think is really sort of a fascinating an emerging paradigm that we're seeing more and more. Gert, let me turn to you and sort of maybe picking up this from a retailer's perspective. I mean, amazing to see the breadth and depth of your work from developing and overseeing Woolworths Fishing for the Future Seafood Sustainability Program to abalone ranching. And whilst I would love to hear more about ranching of mollusks, certainly I shall endeavor to keep us on track here. So let's focus on Woolworths and dedicated to food sustainability programming, fishing for the future, based in South Africa. And I can see some important themes that are coming through where there is a focus on producing sustainably from the ocean. At the same time, effectively protecting our natural resources. And I know that's something that you certainly have been thinking about. I mean, so my question to you, Gert, is do you think that you're making headway, and with the ambition that you've set out for fishing, for the future? I'd love your reflections on that.
Kristian, good afternoon. Thank you very much. I'll maybe also start off with just a bit of background on Woolworths. We are a large premium retailer mostly in South Africa. We have 430 food stores in South Africa and another 64 stores throughout the rest of Africa. And really, we have been involved in considering sustainability aspects with our seafood buying decisions for at least the past 20 years. So we created the Fishing for the Future program in 2008. Shortly thereafter, we partnered with the World Wildlife Fund. And in 2012, we made commitments that mostly focused on ocean health, that we would only sell certain types of certified and green-rated seafood. And really nowadays, sustainability is the first thing that we look at when potentially adding a new supplier. And I think if you look at progress over the past 10 to 15 years, I think there has been tremendous progress, not just within Woolworths, but within the seafood industry as a whole. I think the if you look at the data from the FAO, around 78% of landed fish nowadays come from sustainably managed stocks. So certainly a lot of management, but at the same time, there are new challenges and risk emerging. I think climate change is something that we need to look at, ocean plastics, and also the social aspects of the whole thing. So in 2020, we did a major review of our Fishing for the Future program, and emerging from that really is two new focus areas that we need to consider. So I think where in the past we certainly focus on the production side of things, certainly the view now is that we need to have a whole value chain perspective, and that as a company we need to specifically and personally engage with all of the actors in our supply chains. And at last count, we were dealing with about 130 different companies in our seafood supply chains. And the second part, and you alluded to it earlier, is that we really need to look at social and economic aspects as well, in addition to the environmental aspects. So as an outcome of that, and in restructuring our program, there's three focus areas going forward. We're really going to focus on responsible sourcing. So that's putting in all the systems in place for us to be able to manage our suppliers. It's new digital supplier engagement platforms. It's new due diligence systems. It's a new suppliers chain scoring system. The second major focus area, responsible consumption. As a retailer, we can source the most responsibly produced seafood. If our customers don't buy it, it's not sustainable. So a real focus on that one. And I think that's a tough one to do because essentially we need to change customer behavior on that one. And then the third focus area for us is transparency and proactive transparency. Going forward, Woolworths will publicly map and disclose all of its seafood supply chains. So a lot of changes coming for us, but I think they're important ones and should contribute to increase sustainability.
Yeah, interesting. The notion of integrating the dimensions of transparency, the social dimensions, really thinking it in a holistic fashion throughout the entire seafood supply chain. And I think those that are watching will find that a really interesting dimension. That is an evolution of the seafood, certainly the sustainable seafood, community. Craig, can I turn to you, Chief Executive Officer, Genuine Alaska Pollock Producers. So we're going from where Gert was sitting in the waters of South Africa to the Northeast Pacific, where the headquarters are of your organization, Craig. I know you're based in Washington, D.C., so I worked out that you're probably about 12,000 kilometers away from Gert at the moment. So we're zooming across the ocean, and despite this distance, between your two areas of interest and geographies, I would argue that probably there's some things that Gert mentioned that are going to resonate with you, and I think if I take this further a little bit and think about about what you're doing, I was struck by the Wild Alaska Pollock Industry's response to the pandemic and the challenges that this has brought about. And this obviously has been a tough year, and as far as the supply chain perspective is concerned, but I think you remain optimistic, and I'd love to hear a little bit about how this has been for you, because this has been a whole new sort of another sort of dimension to think about into the supply chain. And as Andrea and Gert are trying to grapple with all these other things, they now have to deal with this. And I think we'd all love to hear a little bit about your thoughts on how's it been, and are we overcoming these challenges? Give us some thoughts on that, Craig.
You bet. Thank you very much. I mean, as you referenced, the Association of Genuine Alaska Pollock Producers, we are the marketing arm for the U.S.-based Alaska pollock industry, and we work tirelessly to build demand and awareness for what we believe is the perfect protein that we believe, again, checks all the boxes for what consumers are looking for today. As you referenced, this was a very challenging year on the production side for not only Alaska pollock, but virtually every food product. I think we handled that issue very well, and it couldn't have honestly have come at a better time in recent history, in that consumers are today more aware and interested in where their food comes from than they've been in recent years. And I think that's really helped us to explain why we've had some of the challenges on the production side of the equation. On the demand side, it's been a wonderful year for Alaska Pollock. We work at GAP to expand our footprint beyond where we currently are, but where we currently are is obviously in the frozen food aisle at retail and very well represented in the quick service restaurants as well as a core menu item. Those are two of the channels that have overperformed during COVID. And so from a demand perspective, Alaska Pollock has been very fortunate during the pandemic to be placed very well where consumers are today. But again, as you said, the production side is where we've put a lot of our industry and efforts in making sure that we're able to provide that protein during these periods of very high demand.
So that's interesting. May I just have a quick follow-up question, if I may? And often these times when there are challenges, people have to are making tough choices in terms of, the food that they're buying and where they're sourcing, and is there still a demand for sustainability, during this past year? I mean, are people still thinking about, I want to make that responsible choice?
Yes, that's a great question. And we've worked very hard in doing consumer polling work, not only in the United States, but in Europe as well. And sustainability has really moved up in terms of priority for the consumers, in large measure because of COVID. I think consumers are today not only concerned about if their food is good for them, but if it's good for the planet. And when we talk about planet, we mean that very holistically. So yes, we are very much as an organization leaning in on marketing efforts that really talk about the impact that our product has on the environment, not only just in terms of preservation of the biomass, and Alaska Pollock is actually very proud to be one of the largest certified sustainable fisheries in the world, but also in terms of our climatary impact. And that's one of the reasons that we've invested so heavily in things like life cycle assessments so that we can hand our downstream partners like a Metro, like a Woolworths and others to make sure that they know what our carbon footprint is and how we fit into their sustainability goals.
So I think that's a really heartening to hear. I think, of coming out of a tough year, that we're still very much in people's minds. There was a lot of discussion about the relationship of humanity with nature, and thinking about this, and people hopefully are extending that to their food choices in certain geographies where they have that flexibility to do so. That's really interesting. But let's take this further, a little bit further, and maybe explore a little area around sustainability that I think a lot of people don't often think about. And let me bring in Marika McCauley Sine, Vice President of Global Sustainability at Mars Petcare. You have spent an incredible amount of your career bringing these social and environmental dimensions of sustainability together. And most recently, an area that I think most people are not really connecting to when it comes to seafood sustainability is, of course, the sustainability of pet food. And I think this is a fascinating area, and one that, I think is probably increasing in importance, given certainly over the last year, and many geographies around the world, we hear lots of people that are actually, getting more pets and surrounding themselves with pets to get them through this rather tough period. So really sort of fascinating to hear from you on this. And we know that and this may come as a surprise to people, that Mars Petcare has been sourcing sustainably fish for more than 10 years, or more than a decade already. And I guess, give us a sense why did Mars embark on this, on this rather ambitious journey? Most people think, well, actually, let's just give pets whatever it is, and let's not think about this at all. And I'm sure there's some learnings along the way, but Marika, can I hand over to you? Love to hear a little bit more on that.
Great. Thank you, Kristian. Very happy to share some reflections on this fascinating conversation. Mars Petcare is involved in sustainable sourcing of fish because we serve millions of cats every single day around the world. Mars Incorporated, as a family-owned, purpose-driven company, is focused on trying to do business in ways that not only meet the needs of pets, but also build a better and more sustainable world for the future. And 10 years ago, we sat down with our partner, World Wildlife Fund, WWF, and given their expertise in environmental sustainability, they raised our awareness about the pressures that fisheries are facing around the world. And in fact, as we know, this continues today. Many are at risk of collapse, and many fish species are at risk of becoming endangered or even extinct. So we knew that we had to act as a business. And with WWF's guidance, what we set 10 years ago was, at the time, a really audacious goal to source 100% of our fish sustainably. And over the years, we're pleased with the progress we've made, more than 70% toward reaching that goal. But as we look to meeting our commitments, we reflect on some of the lessons that we've learned along the way. Firstly, engagement of our procurement function. So what we've done is we've engaged with every single fish buyer across Mars, and we've helped them understand the broader context of sustainability and how it relates to what they do day to day, and given them the tools and the resources and the guidelines to start buying in new ways. And they've really become the champions and the drivers of the success for us in this journey so far, and they certainly will continue to be. The second lesson for us as we look ahead, drawing on this experience, is about collaboration. What we've seen is that taking part in some of the initiatives that have been discussed today, groups like the Seafood Task Force or the Consumer Goods Forum, they're so incredibly important because this is where we can start to tackle collectively some of the common challenges we face, like, for example, in issues of areas of traceability or responsible recruitment. These are kind of topics that no one company or no one industry can really tackle alone, and the need to come together, the opportunity to make change through collaboration, has really been a key part of our journey so far. And lastly, engagement with governments. What we've seen is that government regulation and smart policy can really change the game at scale where it's most needed in the fishing industry. And we've seen that when government and business engage, and business can identify those aspects of supply chains that they can really use reformed regulation or smarter policy, we can see change really start to happen. As we look ahead, we feel like it's necessary is really an unprecedented level of commitment and collaboration, commitment to sourcing fish sustainably by more and more companies. As we've talked about, more commitment by consumers to seek out sustainable choices, but also that collaboration and bringing people together in unprecedented new ways that help us see new technologies, new innovations, new ways to behave at scale that are going to drive the solutions on some of the challenges that we're all really trying to overcome through this work.
So that's again, hopefully, everyone can see that there's a real theme of collaboration, working together. Really thinking about the sort of strength in numbers that Andrea had kicked off this entire conversation. I do want to come back to you, Marika, if I can, just on a brief point that I'm curious about. Given your interest on the social side and dimensions of things, does the social dimensions feature in the pet food, sustainable seafood, pet food space that you're thinking about? I mean, it wouldn't be something that everyone is naturally thinking about. You're serving all these meals to cats. Cats are not necessarily thinking about the social dimensions, but is this something that you're thinking about and trying to strive in within, Mars Petcare?
Absolutely. It's incredibly important as we all pursue sustainability in fishing that we think not only about the environmental aspects of sustainability, but also about the social aspects. And that's a responsibility to deeply understanding what are the challenges facing people in the fishing industry around the world, and how can we all play a role in supporting resolve those challenges. One exciting partnership we've been a part of that's trying to move the needle on that very topic is with the U.S. Agency for International Development. And together with them over the past 3 years, we've been trying to pilot innovations that really leverage technology, resources like blockchain, to help address some of the gaps in connectivity for workers who are on vessels and may have a difficulty having communication to people on land, and also using blockchain technologies to help workers have better traceability of their own documentation, as many of them are migrants. This is all critically important because we need to build a sustainable future for this industry in which people's rights are respected, even as we focus on the environmental sustainability aspects as well.
Yeah, I mean that I think is again a really exciting dimension, a real sort of transformation over the last decade of retailers and companies thinking about these social dimensions and really putting them on the table and really bringing them in in the as far as their sourcing and guidelines are concerned. Let me come back to you, Andrea, on this. You mentioned the Global Tuna Alliance, and I think you've heard our some of our colleagues on the line here have said about working together and coming together, and I just wonder, given your role within the Global Tuna Alliance and Metro's role, do you want to say just a little bit of, about that and why you think that is working well and perhaps is a great model for others to follow suit on?
Yes, happy to do so, Kristian. So actually, when we started the Global Tuna Alliance, we had the, let's say, two streams. One was that we had already in the UK a lot of companies that worked towards government engagement. And Marika mentioned that before as her third part, how important it is to engage with governments and to engage with RFMOs, for example. So the second part was that we signed in 2016 the Tuna Traceability Declaration. And we wanted to succeed here. We wanted really to make tuna fully traceable. And we all knew at that time already in 2016 that the goal of having full transparency and traceability in tuna until 2020 was actually a high ambition. But these two streams actually led us to start the Global Tuna Alliance together with a lot of UK retailers, but also retailers like us in Germany and Ahold Delhaize. And what we want to do is we are committed to improve our supply chain interoperability, and we want to ensure that all the fish we sell is legally sourced. And for that, actually, we need to have full transparency. And I think this is one of the key topics. And let's say the beauty of these initiatives, also referring now what Marika said with the Consumer Goods Forum, we are working also with in these fish initiatives. We have Global Tuna Alliance, GSSI, and Global GDST, so the Dialogue on Seafood Traceability. We can put really a pressure on the full market, and we can put a pressure on the RFMOs, because as a single company, you can't do that. But with GTA, you can really do that.
Yeah, I mean, that's amazing. That's a good example
That's important.
of strength in numbers. Absolutely there. And I think that notion of bringing that together in a way that you can use those market forces is incredibly powerful, and something that I think, hopefully we're doing more and more of. Let me come to you, Gert, for perhaps a sort of final word on this last round. And then I'm gonna come back to each of our panelists and seek what their bit of advice is. What's that one piece of advice that they want to give to you all watching on some of their experiences? And we'll come back to them all. But Gert, can I come back to you? I'm curious from your perspective. You've heard some of our colleagues on the line here, talk about their different sort of opportunities and where they think some of the strengths of what they're doing there. Of course, there's the flip side. There are the obstacles and the challenges, and I expect some of those that are going to be in your region are going to be different to some of the other regions. And I'm curious, very briefly, do you have just a couple of thoughts on what are a couple of those obstacles or challenges that you have faced in the work that you're doing there?
Kristian, yes. I think our main challenge is sourcing enough seafood locally. South Africa have a limited number of species that's fished locally, and the aquaculture potential in the country is severely limited. So our first choice would be to source locally, but at the moment we import around 70% of the fish that we sell. And some of our most popular species is imported as well. If you look at Africa as a whole, I think Africa has lagged behind in terms of management and management efficiencies over the past 10 years. MSC, for example, has only certified 2 fisheries in Africa, so it makes it a lot more difficult for us to source seafood generally, and we are a long way from all the markets, so there's additional costs to that as well.
Interesting. So obviously, I think but I guess one would argue if it's lagging behind, there's certainly opportunities, for and increasingly thinking about sustainability in Africa, and I think I think I've always said, watch this space. I think there's some amazing opportunities, that are coming up, as far as Africa is concerned and sustainable seafood. Let me turn to you, Andrea. Go ahead.
I fully agree with you on that one, and I think certainly from an aquaculture perspective, and around the Great Lakes region in Africa, there is absolutely tremendous potential for production.
Yeah, I think it's a fascinating subject area that I think I think requires much more investigation. Andrea, let me turn to you. Brief final thought from you on what's that one takeaway that you want to leave people with? That one bit of advice, involved in so many different initiatives, doing lots of great things, but tell us what's the thing that you want to leave with everybody?
You just said it. Collaboration is key. So none of us can solve these challenges alone. So, and no matter how basic sometimes it seems, it all starts with collaboration at the whole supply chain, with your suppliers, with NGOs, with governments, but not less important, in a pre-competitive collaboration in these industry and multi-stakeholder platforms.
Good. So collaboration, key, critical. Craig, to you. What's your one takeaway for us?
Meet consumers where they are. I think we are all very committed to producing sustainable products and selling sustainable products. Our government holds us to a very high standard. NGOs hold us to a very high standard, and we hold ourselves to a very high standard. But we want all of the other species out there to be held to the same standards or even higher. And I think the only way we're going to drive that is not through government regulation, not through NGO involvement, and not even through cooperation between ourselves. We need the consumers to demand that. And I think meeting consumers where they are, understanding what resonates with them, and making it impactful for them will make them really want to seek out products in the marketplace that are sustainable. And I think at the end of the day, that's going to be the best thing for us all.
Great advice. I love that. And I think often the case is that I think there's a tendency to not really think about starting where consumers are, but starting where you want them to be. And in which case you then have to play a lot of catch up. And I think that's a great piece of advice for everyone to hear. Marika, let's come to you on this. What's your one takeaway? What's that big thing that you wish you would have done, or thinking about the last decade and some of the work that you've been involved with?
I think it's all about commitment, action, and collaboration. So first, in terms of commitment, being clear about whatever type of organization you work in, what is the change that you want to make in this space? What is the audacious stretch goal that you can set to really try to push for change in your own sphere of influence? Then it's about action, and all of us really needing to recommit to delivering on those goals, to engaging in whatever ways we can with consumers, with governments, to make the change and see it through, even when it's very difficult. And we face a lot of challenge and complexity in this space. And then lastly, reinforcing, of course, the collaboration message. As we've all said, the scale of some of the challenges in the fishing industry are bigger than any one company can tackle alone. But we've certainly been so encouraged through the cross-sector collaborative platforms we've been a part of. This is where we can come together in really new ways. We can align on common standards, common practices, and drive them forward. So it's all about commitment, action, and collaboration for us as we look ahead.
Fantastic. And it's a really great messages. And I think fantastic sort of, again, making sure there's ambition and enthusiasm coming from, and the energy I think that all of you have projected on this panel today has been really kind of comes through a lot. And I think that'll be felt by some of the those watching. Gert, let me come to you. Again, we've heard some various elements of sort of the great stuff that Woolworths is doing, and some of the things that you've been involved with, and certainly providing us with some of those African perspectives. What's your big takeaway that you'd like to leave everyone with?
Kristian, I think it's to never stop innovating. We're only going to solve these problems if there's continuous improvement at all levels. And as a retailer, I think we can inspire our customers to take action with us, but we can also inspire our suppliers to act and to continuously produce seafood that's got the most positive impacts on the environment and elsewhere.
Fantastic. Well, listen, this has been an enormously interesting panel. It's always the sorts of case that I'd love to spend much more time with you and learn a little bit more about your thoughts. I still think there's much to be unpacked from each of your various things that you're involved with, whether it's Andrea and the Global Tuna Alliance and the Meta Coalition, or Gert with things in Africa. Craig, how you're addressing the issues of food in the United States and sustainability and coping with the pandemic. Lots of lessons learned there, I'm sure. I'm sure lots of follow-up from those who will be participating. And indeed, Marika, not last but not least, the Petcare side of things, and the kind of the work with how do we take the fish from the sea and into the pet food systems, and I think there is much to be learned there as well, and to be unpacked. But I think what I certainly took away from this discussion, and maybe if you allow me to just relay a few points, is that I heard from all of you that in this, to establish a pre-competitive space and to collaborate and work together. And I think it's very much a case, as I said earlier, of strength in numbers, but also this notion of we can move faster together than by ourselves. And I think all of you have said that to some degree. Engaging with the government, making sure that we have those policy frameworks that are in place, trying to, kind of work with governments to establish, the incentives as opposed to the big sticks, so that you are in a very good position. We talked a little bit about this in terms of, the role that markets can play with governments, about, your willingness to engage with government based on, your demand and sustainable seafood. But that's going to be, have some requirements from government to enforce some of those regulations. Thirdly, public motivation and incentives, looking at behavior. Craig, you made the very good point of meeting consumers where they are as opposed to where you want them to be, and being mindful of that and taking them along with you on this journey, as opposed to trying to sort of force something on them. And I think all of you are sitting at an enormously important intersection point between the supply chains and consumers. And so I think that's an enormously powerful role, which I think all of you have spoken to. And certainly last but not least is around, innovating and, requires, constant improvement, and thinking about the sorts of things that you should be introducing innovation and ambition, and raising that level of ambition so that you are constantly pushing those around you and your peers to something that is aspiring to what we all hope is indeed, at the end of the day, a healthier ocean, and that we are able, through a longer period of time, not in just the business of tomorrow, but in the business of the future, and thinking about how we're going to be continually sourcing seafood and fish from the ocean. There certainly is enough there, but we need to be really mindful about how we produce it and take it out of the ocean. So with that, Andrea, Gert, Craig, Marika, I want to thank you for spending time with us today and getting your thoughts and ideas. And I guarantee you that there is going to be lots of follow-up and interest in everything that you're involved with. I certainly encourage those watching to engage in social media and let people know about some of the really insightful thoughts that our panelists have offered today. And we look forward to engaging with you further and following up some of these conversations that no doubt many on the line will have with you. So with that, I say thank you and goodbye.